Hey Susan Sells, it is Greg and I am live in the car today to go over the three numbers that we're tracking right now that are driving the real estate market as we begin 2026. See what I did there? I'm in the car where numbers that drive. Anyway, so the first thing is 42 days on market. So 4-2, that is up from about 30 on average. Every community is very different, we're finding right now. And that's the one trend that we can definitely speak to. Each of these different numbers is more general to the market because each town is different. Each town has different supply and demand relationships. Each town has different supply overall, which will affect the demand relationships. But primarily, what we're noticing is that days on market is up. And that's partially a seasonal trend, we feel, something that is a byproduct of the winter weather. And obviously, the less accessible properties are, the less possible it is for buyers to make offers. So that could have something to do with the overall temperature of the market. But we use days on market as a temperature check typically when it comes to the real estate market because it shows how quickly are listings coming on and being absorbed and going under agreement and selling. So 42 days on market is the statewide average right now. Some towns are much tighter than that, closer to the 30 days on market average we were seeing, or even less during COVID or just after COVID. And so that is one of the first numbers that we are tracking because it's important to what the buyer and seller demand relationship is right now. So let's talk a little bit more about that. The second number we're tracking is that in the past 3 months, so since October of last year, there have been 513 price changes. And those price changes averaged right around 5%. Meaning that the price came down about 5%. What that doesn't mean is that overall the market is down 5%. If you look at the overall market data, prices are still up year over year, quarter over quarter, and even month over month. And we're not seeing a massive decrease in the pricing that's coming out even as we begin to start the early spring market, which is typically around February 15th. But I think it is important to note that there is some downward pressure on prices. And that doesn't necessarily mean as a whole. As I said, each market is very hyper local right now. But 513 price changes certainly shows that there are motivated sellers looking to move their properties and motivated buyers that are still out there looking and buying at those newly reduced prices. So what does that mean for you? If you're a first-time home buyer, it might be a good time to maybe save a little bit of money depending on the community you're looking in. And if you're still a seller, doesn't mean that you need to panic that prices are down 5%. It just means that there is a slight equivocation of the buyer demand and the seller demand, and that really is what drives prices. So we know that buyer demand is very, very related to the interest rates, and so that's the third number that we're tracking, which is the average 30-year interest rate right now, and we are right about 6.09, whereas the average 3 months ago was about 6.34. So we're down about a quarter of a point, which does drive up demand. And obviously that's a lagging number. When rates go down, it doesn't immediately equate to more buyers in the marketplace, but it does increase the amount of loan applications and it gets people into the marketplace, which will really determine what the actual supply and demand relationship is at the time in the market. So that's something we're watching, is that as we get closer to 5% is a big number. If we can get to the high fives, 5.99, which for some borrowers right now on a 15-year note, that is possible. But for the most part, the average 30-year rate is still over 6, and it's still in the low 6s. And so because of that, that is something that we're watching, because obviously the overall climate right now within the market is that we are trying to drive interest rates lower to sustain demand. And so that's something that we think 5.9 in that range, once we break into the 5s, is a really big number when it comes to buyers' impressions of what's happening in the market. 5% on an interest rate is much different than the 7% that was of 6 months to a year ago. So those are the three key numbers that we think are driving the market as we head into the early spring market, which, as I said, begins on February 15th. Reach out to us if there's anything you're seeing as you look at the market, or if you have any questions as we look at the market. Bye now.